I was 17 when I realized I wasn't part of a family. I was part of a support system. My name's Simon. I'm 28 now, but back then, I was just a teenager who believed that hard work and good grades could earn you a ticket to a better life. I was the kind of kid who fixed old computers for fun, built websites in my free time, and stayed up watching YouTube tutorials about ethical hacking while everyone else my age was glued to Netflix. IT was my world. It made sense to me. It felt like something I could actually build a future with. And for a long time, I thought my parents saw that too. But things started shifting around my junior year of high school. It wasn't sudden. It was subtle at first. The way my parents' eyes would glaze over when I talked about learning Python, or how they'd interrupt my excitement over building a custom PC with something about how not everyone can afford to play around with toys. Still, I brushed it off. They were old school. Immigrant mindset. Stability mattered more than passion. I figured I just had to prove it could work. So I worked harder. Got into a competitive summer coding program. Landed a paid internship doing back-end development for a small company downtown. I was on track to get a scholarship. I thought, finally, they'd see this wasn't just a hobby. It was my future. And then came my brother, Daniel. He's 4 years older than me in the definition of a golden child. Everything about him was loud. His voice, his clothes, his plans. If I was the quiet one who calculated before I moved, Daniel jumped first and figured it out midair. That might have been admirable if he ever learned from the crashes. But he didn't. Daniel had this way of turning every mistake into someone else's fault. Failed a class? The professor had it out for me. Lost his job? They didn't understand my potential. Got dumped. She was intimidated by my drive. And my parents bought it. Every single time. When Daniel dropped out of business school to become an entrepreneur, my mom threw him a party. When he moved back home 6 months later after burning through his savings on a failed sneaker flipping scheme, my dad loaned him $5,000 and told him it was just a stepping stone. Meanwhile, I was told to keep my college applications modest. Don't get ahead of yourself, my mom said one night while we were cleaning the kitchen. You're smart, Simon, but we can't afford something fancy. I remember standing there, my hands still wet from rinsing plates, staring at her like she'd just slapped me. What about the scholarship? I asked. I have a shot. Full ride. She dried her hands, not looking at me. Daniel might need help with some startup costs. He's close to something big. Startup costs. For Daniel. Again. That night I sat on my bed with my acceptance letter to a top-tier IT program in one hand and my part-time job schedule in the other, trying to calculate how much it would take to move out early, if it came to that. I didn't want to believe it yet. I didn't want to believe my own parents would block me from opportunity just to feed my brother's next half-baked dream. But that belief started crumbling fast. The final straw came 2 weeks before decision day. My internship supervisor had recommended me for a tech grant, $10,000 to cover tuition and living expenses if I committed to studying full-time in the city. It was everything I needed. I ran home after school, practically shaking with excitement, and told my parents over dinner. I'll never forget the way my dad looked at me. Not proud, not impressed, just annoyed. That kind of money could really help Daniel get his business off the ground, he said, without even glancing up from his plate. I laughed. I thought he was joking. I earned this, I said, the grin still stuck on my face but starting to slip. I worked for it. It's mine. But you're still under our roof, my mom chimed in. You don't need the money as much as your brother does. I stared at them. My own parents. Like I was talking to strangers. He's 21, I said slowly. He's already had more chances than most people get in a lifetime. And he blew them. That's not fair, my dad said sharply. You've always had it easier. You're the quiet one. The smart one. Daniel struggles more. And there it was. The root of everything. My success wasn't something to be celebrated. It was ammunition against me. Evidence that I didn't need support because Daniel needed it more. Because Daniel struggled. Because I was fine. That night, I packed my laptop, my acceptance letter, and a week's worth of clothes. I texted my friend Adam. His older sister had an empty room in her apartment near campus, and asked if the offer to crash there still stood. It did. I didn't tell my parents where I was going. I didn't leave a note. I didn't even take the charger for my toothbrush. I walked out the door without looking back. For the first few weeks, they didn't call. I don't know if they were angry or just expected me to come crawling back. But I didn't. I started school. I found a part-time job at an IT help desk. I lived lean, learned fast, and carved out a life for myself that was entirely mine. The silence from home stretched into months, then a year, then more, and I thought that was the end of it. Until last year. Out of the blue, I got a Facebook message from my mom. It was short, cold, just one sentence. Daniel needs your help. I didn't respond. A week later, another message. This time from my dad. We need to talk. It's about your brother. Still, I stayed silent. And then came the phone call. A number I didn't recognize, but something in me said pick up. So I did. Simon. My mother's voice cracked through the static, and for a second, I almost didn't recognize it. Daniel is in trouble. Real trouble. He made some business decisions. I cut her off. I'm not giving him money. She paused. Then, more forcefully, we're not asking. We're telling you. You're his brother. He needs $120,000, and you're in a position to help. I felt the blood drain from my face. $120,000. From me. I hadn't spoken to them in 6 years. They hadn't once asked how I was doing, hadn't attended my graduation, never even acknowledged the startup I built from scratch after college. And now they wanted 6 figures? Like I was their backup plan? I took a deep breath. My voice was steady when I answered. What exactly happened? And as she began to explain, halting, defensive, half-blaming market changes and shady partners, I opened my laptop and pulled up Daniel's latest social media posts. Champagne bottles. New cars. A business trip in Dubai. This wasn't an emergency. This was a cleanup job for another one of Daniel's disasters. And they thought I'd foot the bill. But this time, I wasn't 17. And this time, I wasn't walking away. I was going to respond. I didn't sleep the night after that call. Not because of the money. I had the money. Years of contract gigs, smart investments, living below my means, and building a modest cybersecurity firm with a small team of loyal, brilliant misfits had finally paid off. The number didn't scare me. What kept me awake was the bitter taste of the past resurfacing, the way my mother said, we're not asking. We're telling you. Like I owed them something. Like I was a vault they could just unlock when Daniel torched another opportunity. It wasn't the first time they acted like I didn't get a say, but something about this felt different. Sharper. Louder. Final. I didn't answer any more of their calls that week. My mom left a voicemail every morning, some pleading, some guilt-tripping, and a few where she didn't even bother hiding the frustration in her voice. Simon, you're being dramatic. You've always been sensitive. I stopped listening to them halfway through. By day 5, they switched tactics. My dad emailed me a PDF, some kind of half-baked investment pitch Daniel had written, full of vague promises, stock images, and fake revenue projections. At the bottom of the document, scribbled in a scanned signature box, was my name. Typed. Not signed. Typed. They were already pitching me as a backer to someone. My hands shook as I sat back in my office chair, reading the email again. It was addressed to someone named Kyle P., who apparently worked in venture capital. My dad's message read, "We've secured interest from Simon W., founder of RenSEC. He'll be providing seed funding and tech advisory." My mouth went dry. This wasn't a request anymore. They were using my name, without my permission, pretending I had agreed to bankroll Daniel's newest disaster. That night I called Adam, my old roommate. We hadn't lived together in years, but we still grabbed lunch every other week, kept each other grounded. He picked up on the second ring. "What's up, man? I think my parents committed fraud." He blinked at me. On the video call, not sure if I was joking. I wasn't smiling. When I explained everything, starting from the phone call to the fake investment email, he just shook his head slowly, then let out a low whistle. "Dude, you need to shut that down. Fast." I already had my lawyer on retainer. I forwarded everything to her, along with a warning to get ahead of any misuse of my name in official documents. But even with legal steps in motion, something in me cracked open that night. Not just anger. Something older. Deeper. Something that had been lying dormant since the day I left home. It wasn't just that they were trying to steal from me now. It was that they always believed they were entitled to my future. Even back then, I started digging through my old email, ones I hadn't opened in years. College admissions. Financial aid records. A string of scholarships I was offered, and then withdrawn. I thought I had just missed the deadlines. But no, I found one message from my high school counselor that chilled me. "Hi Simon, just confirming your parents declined the Bright Code Foundation grant on your behalf. They mentioned you'd be pursuing a different path." I sat there, staring at the screen. They had declined the $10,000 grant. Behind my back. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't just been paranoid. They sabotaged me. On purpose. To funnel that money to Daniel. And now, they were trying again. Bigger this time. Louder. I couldn't unsee it anymore. They never believed in me. Not really. I was just the fallback plan for when Daniel failed again. It all started making sense. The way my laptop mysteriously went missing the week before I had a coding competition in high school. How they refused to sign the FAFSA forms for my college, claiming they needed time to think. Why my mom once guilted me into giving Daniel my savings account PIN to help him fix a mistake he made with his bank. I wanted to believe they were just naive. But this wasn't naivety. This was manipulation. That weekend, they showed up at my office. I was working late, headphones on, zoning out with security logs and analytics dashboards when I saw movement in the reflection of my monitor. I turned, and there they were. My mom and dad, standing at the glass door. No warning. No call. Just there. I buzzed them in out of reflex. They walked in like they owned the place. "Simon," my dad said, like nothing was wrong. "We figured it'd be better to talk face to face." I stood up. I didn't say anything. My mom took a step forward, wringing her hands. "Honey, we didn't mean to upset you. But Daniel's in a really difficult situation. He trusted the wrong people. It's not his fault." I crossed my arms. "You forged my name on a pitch deck." "It wasn't forged," my dad said defensively. "We typed it. It was just to show confidence. We knew you'd come around eventually." My jaw clenched. "That's not how this works. You don't get to decide my involvement." My mom's eyes narrowed. "After everything we've done for you?" I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. "You mean all the support you gave Daniel? All the chances? The way you cut my legs out from under me every time I had a shot?" "You were fine," she snapped. "You always figured things out." "No thanks to you." We stared at each other across the room. All the pretense is gone now. Then she said the words that made my blood run cold. "You owe us, Simon." My mouth went dry. "Oh, you. You wouldn't be where you are if we hadn't raised you, fed you, sacrificed for you," she said, voice rising. "You think you did this all on your own?" My dad chimed in, quieter but firmer. "Daniel's your brother. Family helps family. That's how it works." "No," I said quietly. "That's how you work. You help Daniel. You use me." My mom's voice cracked, a mix of disbelief and offense. "We did everything we could for you. You've always been ungrateful." And there it was. That word. Ungrateful. The final insult. The one they'd used my whole life anytime I dared to ask for something I'd earned. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just walked over to the door and opened it. "You need to leave." They stared at me like I'd slapped them. My dad's face darkened. "You're really doing this?" "Yes." My mom's voice wobbled. "Then don't bother calling when you need us." I stared back, calm. "I haven't needed you since the day I left." They walked out. No hug. No goodbye. And for a second, I thought that was the end of it. But I was wrong. 3 days later, I got a letter. Registered mail. A formal request. From Daniel's lawyer. Claiming I had committed to financial support, and they were seeking arbitration for failure to follow through on a verbal agreement. They were suing me. For $120,000. And that was the moment. Right there, holding that ridiculous letter in my hands, heart pounding like a drum, that I knew the old version of me, the kid who wanted to believe his family just didn't understand him, was gone. They weren't confused. They weren't misinformed. They were predators. And I was finally done playing nice. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into my desk drawer. Then I opened a new document on my computer. I started writing. Not just a legal response. Not just a countersuit. But something bigger. I had 6 years of silence. 6 years of receipts. Emails, bank transfers, scholarship withdrawals, signed forms they'd tampered with. Everything. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to expose everything. There's a kind of silence that settles over you when your own family turns against you in broad daylight. Not the quiet of solitude. Solitude has peace in it. No, this silence is heavier. It hums in your chest. It makes the hours slower. Food loses its taste. Time becomes water, slipping past your fingers no matter how tightly you try to hold on. That was me for the first week after receiving the lawsuit. I stopped responding to emails. Let my team handle the day-to-day. My startup, Ren SEC, had just closed a round of funding, and my partners kept checking in, gently at first. "Hey, all good?" Then more concerned. "Want to hop on a call?" "You've been quiet." But I had no words. The letter from Daniel's lawyer sat in my desk drawer like a cursed object. Every time I opened it, it whispered all the things I'd buried years ago. You don't matter. You're just the safety net. You'll always come second to him. For a few days, I actually wondered if maybe I was overreacting. Maybe my mom was right. Maybe I had been too cold, too unforgiving. After all, they raised me, put food on the table, kept the lights on. Couldn't that count for something? But then I'd remember how they snuffed out every spark I tried to light. How they made me choose between family and future. And how, even now, after 6 years of silence, they couldn't come back with love. Only expectation. Only demands. I hit a kind of emotional rock bottom that week. Not the kind that makes you spiral outward, but the kind that makes you close in on yourself. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stopped moving. Until I got a package. No return address. Inside was a crumpled hoodie. Old, faded. The one I used to wear all through high school. The back still had the fraying patch of a wolf howling at the moon. My first ever embroidery, stitched by hand. Beneath it, a small piece of paper. One sentence. Don't let them shrink you again. No signature. But I knew who sent it. Melissa. We weren't close anymore. Life had pulled us in different directions. But once upon a time, she was the only person who saw me when no one else did. My childhood best friend. The only one who cheered at my high school graduation while my parents sat stiff and silent. She was the one who hugged me after I moved out, whispering, "You'll do more without them than you ever could with them." We lost touch after she moved states, but we never stopped watching each other's lives from afar. That hoodie, that note, it flipped a switch in me. I remembered who I was, what I'd built, what I'd survived, and I decided I wasn't going to let them take any more of me. So I got to work. First, I called my lawyer and greenlit a full-scale response. We filed a countersuit for defamation and attempted fraud. I sent her every email, every screenshot, every document. The forged pitch deck, the grant they declined, the fake verbal agreement. I even gave her access to an old folder I'd titled "Just in Case" back when I was 19 and paranoid enough to save every text where my parents guilt me into sending Daniel money. She didn't say much, but the pause on the other end of the line spoke volumes. "This isn't just a defense," she said finally. "This is a pattern." Exactly. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to document everything. And while the legal wheels turned, I turned inward. I started walking more. Not just around the block, but full 2-hour treks through the edge of the city, noise-canceling headphones in, listening to music I hadn't touched since college. I went back to the basics, my code. I rewrote parts of RenSEC's core engine from scratch, just for fun. It reminded me why I started building in the first place. At night, I journaled. Not the polished kind. The ugly, raw, unfiltered kind. Anger poured out of me in ink. Grief, too. Not just for the parents I never really had, but for the version of me that still hoped, deep down, that one day they'd say sorry. That they'd admit they were wrong. But some people never do. And the sooner you accept that, the freer you become. Word of the lawsuit spread faster than I expected. It didn't go viral or anything, just quiet ripples through the industry. Investors got wind of it. A few backed off. I don't blame them. No one wants to fund drama. But something surprising happened too. Other founders started reaching out. One guy, Eli, who ran a competitor I used to hate watch on LinkedIn, messaged me directly. "Hey, saw what's going on. Went through something similar with my uncle last year. If you ever want to grab coffee and swap horror stories, I'm around." We did meet for coffee. Then another. And before I knew it, Eli and I were talking about a merger, joining forces to create a stronger suite of cybersecurity products. What started as commiseration turned into strategy, resilience, business synergy. Whatever you want to call it, it worked. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove myself to anyone. I felt equal. Meanwhile, Daniel's life was unraveling. Not because of me, because of him. Turns out, his new company wasn't a real LLC. Just a bunch of domain names and fake testimonials. His supposed investors were all friends he promised payouts to. He even listed a celebrity on his site as a strategic advisor, without permission. That one got him a cease and desist within a week. His girlfriend dumped him. His landlord sued him for back rent. And one by one, the people he'd charmed started waking up to the truth. But the thing that really cracked the mask? A podcast. A niche finance show he went on to pitch his business. He tried to talk big, buzzwords, fast-talking, fake metrics. But the host, a former forensic accountant, started pressing. Can you provide proof of revenue? What exactly does your product do? Why is your investor listed as TBD? The clip went viral, not because he bombed, but because he melted. Live. On air. Mid-interview. The comments were brutal. I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. I felt hollow. Watching him fall apart wasn't satisfying, but it was revealing. Daniel wasn't just a failure. He was a mirror, a distorted version of what I could have been if I hadn't fought to break away. That realization gave me something I didn't expect. Peace. Not forgiveness. I wasn't there yet. But peace. I stopped waiting for justice to feel like revenge. Justice is boring. Quiet. Paper trails and signatures and lawyers in suits. Revenge is fire. Flash. Noise. But justice? Justice is when you go to sleep knowing you're safe from the people who once controlled you. And that's what I wanted. One night, I went to a rooftop bar with a few friends from my early startup days. We laughed, talked about everything except work. And as the city lights blinked below us, one of them raised a glass and said, "To Simon, who built an empire and didn't lose his soul." It hit me harder than I expected, because for the first time, I believed it. I had spent years believing I was only successful because I escaped my family. But maybe, just maybe, I was successful because I chose myself. Every day, even when it was hard, even when it meant walking away from people who swore they loved me, but only on their terms. I looked around that night, at the people who chose me without strings, without conditions, and I realized something. After the lawsuit officially collapsed, once my lawyer proved there was no verbal agreement, no signed contract, and that Daniel's entire pitch was based on fraudulent claims, they went quiet. My parents. Daniel, the lawyer who filed the bogus paperwork on their behalf. Not a single word from them after the judge dismissed the case with a warning about malicious litigation. But silence from people like them is never peace. It's plotting. So I stayed ready. I wasn't about to walk away again, not this time. Because something had changed in me. For years I had trained myself to survive, to escape, to rebuild. But now, I had leverage. Not just money, not just success. I had the truth. And I had proof. 6 years worth of documents, emails, financial receipts, and texts. Evidence of every manipulation, every lie, every time they cut me off at the knees and handed Daniel a boost instead. And here's the thing. I never collected it with revenge in mind. But now I saw it for what it really was. A blueprint. A roadmap to justice. Because Daniel wasn't just reckless. He was dangerous. He had a pattern, building fake companies, taking money under false pretenses, and then leaving others to pick up the pieces. My parents weren't just enabling him, they were partners. Willfully blind when it suited them, willfully cruel when it didn't. I wasn't going to let them use anyone else the way they tried to use me. So I started planning. It began quietly. A weekend trip back to my hometown under the guise of visiting an old teacher. But really, I wanted to see their world. Not from the outside. From within. What were they up to now? What stories were they spinning? What I saw confirmed everything. Daniel had reinvented himself again. This time as a business recovery consultant. He rented a small storefront near downtown. A sleek black logo with the words, Redline Ventures. We get you back on track. His website looked clean. Professional. Until you looked closer. The testimonials were fake. The success stories were plagiarized. The photos of clients were stolen from LinkedIn. I knew the signs. I had audited enough shady startups in my cybersecurity days to recognize a scam when I saw one. He even listed a new set of investors, one of whom was just a photo of a finance influencer with a different name slapped under it. Worse, he was targeting desperate people. I sat at a coffee shop across the street for 3 hours and watched. People walked in alone, left with glossy folders and hopeful eyes. Entrepreneurs, single mothers, laid-off workers looking to rebuild. And I knew, he was selling them nothing. The fury came back. Sharp, clean. But I didn't let it drive me. This time, I let it fuel a plan. I started making calls. First, I reached out to Eli, my now business partner after our companies merged. He was skeptical at first. "You sure you want to stir this up again?" he asked during a late-night Zoom. "Yes," I said. "Because it's not just about me anymore." I showed him everything. The fake LLC filings, the stolen website assets, the doctored reviews. At first, he was just quiet. Then, he leaned forward and said, "Okay, let's do this the right way." He looped in his head of compliance, a sharp, quiet woman named Rena who once shut down a phishing ring impersonating major banks. She took one look at Daniel's operation and said, "This guy's an idiot. He's breaking laws in 3 states." Exactly. Next, I contacted a journalist I once helped with a piece on tech scams. Her name was Anika, young, ambitious, with a bite to her writing that made CEOs flinch. We met for coffee. I laid it out for her. The whole story. Not just the business fraud, but the family history, the manipulation, the fake lawsuit. She took notes in silence. When I finished, she looked up and said, "This isn't just a story. It's a series." We agreed to keep my name off it, for now. I wasn't doing this for publicity. I wanted exposure, not attention. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to know how far Daniel had gone, who else he'd hurt. So I created a burner identity, complete with a fake startup, website, and LinkedIn presence. Then I reached out to Daniel directly through his Redline Ventures site. Claimed I was launching a new crypto payment platform. Said I had some quiet capital and needed strategic consulting. Asked if he was available for a private retainer. He replied within 2 hours. Eager, overconfident, hungry. We scheduled a meeting. He asked to do it via Zoom, so I hired a friend of mine, a professional actor with a tech background, to pose as me. We briefed him, gave him a script, and recorded the whole thing. Daniel promised the moon. "I can make sure you get funding in under 3 months, he said. "You'll need to wire me an upfront fee, of course, $7,000 for the basic tier, $12,000 for premium. That gives you direct access to my network." "Can I talk to one of your other clients?" the actor asked. Daniel smiled. "They're all under NDA. Of course they were. By the end of the call, he had promised partnerships with fake VCs, made up connections to a guy at Y Combinator, and even claimed that I, Simon Wolf, was one of his success stories. That was the nail in the coffin. He was still using my name, still selling the illusion that I owed my success to him. I sent the recording to Rena. She replied 10 minutes later, "This is gold." We now had enough for criminal charges, wire fraud, business impersonation, attempted extortion, defamation, and more. But before we took it to the authorities, I wanted to do something else. Something personal. I wanted Daniel to know it was me. So I sent him an email. Short. Cold. Subject: "You should have stopped at lying to mom and dad. I'm not 17 anymore. See you soon. Simon." No reply. Not immediately. But 3 days later, I got a call from my mother. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail. Her voice trembled, not with sadness, but with fury. "How dare you drag your brother through the mud? After everything we've done for you? You're trying to ruin his life over a misunderstanding? You always were vindictive, Simon." I deleted it. She didn't get it. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about accountability. About drawing a line so deep they couldn't ever cross it again. Anika's article series dropped 2 weeks later. Part 1. The Grifter Next Door. Inside the Fake Empires of Redline Ventures. The first piece went viral. The second one named Daniel directly. The third one dug into the family angle, lightly, respectfully, but enough to show the pattern. Within a month, Daniel's business was shuttered. His lease was revoked. His name blacklisted from multiple investor circles. Complaints flooded into the state's attorney office. And then the subpoenas started. But I wasn't watching it like a soap opera. I had work to do. Because while Daniel's empire crumbled, mine grew stronger. Eli and I finalized our Series B funding. We brought on 2 new advisors. RenSEC 2.0 launched with an AI security module that went viral in the dev community. I hired 3 of the people Daniel had tried to scam, real talent with nowhere to go, and gave them positions with purpose. And quietly, behind the scenes, I began drafting something else. Something Daniel would never see coming. Not a lawsuit. Not another article. Something older. Something closer to home. Because there was one piece left to this puzzle. One final setup. The house my parents lived in, the one they always claimed was ours, the family home, wasn't actually theirs. It was mine. Not legally. Not yet. But it could be. And I knew exactly how to do it. I didn't want cold. I didn't want rage or fire or spectacle. I wanted precision. Clean. Undeniable. Final. And for that, I needed patience. The house had always been a symbol. Not just of control, but of hypocrisy. My parents called it the family home. But it was never about family. It was about Daniel. Every decision made under that roof, from who got what for dinner to who deserved to go to college, revolved around him. I was just the background noise, the fallback, the one who didn't need help. But I remembered something important in the middle of the lawsuit madness. Back when I was 17 and about to move out, my parents forced me to sign over a small life insurance policy my grandfather had left me. It wasn't huge, $30,000 or so, but it was supposed to help me with school. Instead, they said Daniel needed it more. I was still too young to push back, legally. I was angry, but I let it go. What I didn't know then was how much more my grandfather had done behind the scenes. A few months after Anika's article series came out, I got a call from a lawyer named Henry Callow. Old school, proper, the kind of man who still wore cufflinks on Zoom. He represented the estate of my late grandfather, who had passed a few years after I moved out. Apparently, he'd been keeping tabs on the family from a distance, even while he was alive. "I'm sorry it took so long to reach you," Henry said. "Your grandfather left very specific instructions about when this information was to be shared. He knew your parents, favored your brother. He didn't want his final wishes to be manipulated." I didn't say anything. I just listened. "He put the family home into a silent trust before he passed. It wasn't your parents' house to begin with, Simon. He held the title. And upon your 28th birthday, provided certain conditions were met, it passes to you." My heart stopped. Henry continued, calm as ever. "You're 28 now. You met the conditions. And the property is yours." For a moment, I just sat there, staring out the window. I could see the city skyline from my condo, clean lines, glittering lights, everything I'd built without them. And now the house. The one thing they clung to. The thing they believed would always be theirs. It was mine. That was the moment I knew what I had to do. The revenge wasn't about the house. It was about taking back everything they'd stolen from me, choice by choice. So I didn't rush. I waited. Waited until Daniel had burned every bridge, until the investigation into his fake company had gone public, until his accounts were frozen and his credit lines shut down. Then I acted. The eviction notice was delivered on a rainy Tuesday. Official, legal, cold as ice. They had 60 days to vacate. The screaming started before I even stepped out of the car. My mother stood on the porch, holding the paper like it was a snake. "What is this? What is this?" I walked up the drive in silence. My father came out next, jaw tight. "You can't do this, Simon. You're not serious." "I'm very serious." Daniel wasn't there. He'd moved back in 6 months earlier after his business tanked, sleeping in the basement like some failed prophet. "This is our home," my mother spat. "You can't just take it from us." I pulled out the deed. My name on it. My signature. My grandfather's final will. "You never owned it," I said. "Grandpa did. And now I do." "But this is where we raised you," she cried. I didn't flinch. "No. This is where you used me." My dad stepped forward. "You ungrateful little." "Careful," I said flatly. "That kind of talk might get you kicked out sooner." He froze. The weight of it hit all at once. They were out of options. No more control. No more manipulation. No more Daniel-shaped excuses. Just consequences. 60 days came and went. They tried everything. Legal appeals. Emotional voicemails. Even dragged an old family friend into calling me to talk some sense into you. But nothing stuck. The law was clear. And I had the paper trail. The day they moved out, I didn't go. I didn't need to. Rena, the compliance officer, texted me a photo. A moving truck parked outside, my father pacing with a cigarette, my mother sitting on the curb with her head in her hands. Daniel wasn't in the frame. He'd already left. Rumor had it he fled the state, trying to reinvent himself yet again, this time in Florida, using a variation of his name. Didn't matter. I had made sure his history followed him. I didn't sell the house. Not right away. Instead, I renovated it. Tore down the walls that held memories of slammed doors and whispered arguments. Ripped out the old carpet my parents refused to replace because Daniel might spill something again. Repainted every surface. Rewired the basement. Turned his old lair into a soundproof home theater, just because I could. Then I donated it to a nonprofit that helped foster kids aging out of the system. They turned it into a transitional home, clean, safe, with job counseling and tech resources. I even set up a small scholarship fund for any resident interested in IT. That was the part that mattered. Not just taking back what was mine, but transforming it into something better, something good, something they could never touch again. I never spoke to my parents after that. Not once. They tried a few more times. Birthday cards with vague apologies. Christmas texts with smiley face emojis. A desperate email from my mom asking if I'd be willing to forgive and move on. But you can't move on from people who never admit what they've done. You just move past them. Years went by. RenSEC expanded to 3 offices. Eli and I were invited to speak at a national cybersecurity summit. My old hoodie, the one Melissa mailed me, was framed and hanging in my office, next to the first dollar I ever made writing code. I built a new family from scratch. People who believed in me. People I chose. And on quiet nights, when the city buzz faded and the memories tried to crawl back in, I'd remind myself of one thing. The most powerful thing I ever did wasn't escaping them. It was refusing to let them rewrite the story. They tried to define me as the afterthought, the fallback, the quiet one who'd figure it out. But I did more than figure it out. I thrived. Without them. In spite of them. And when the time came, I took back everything. Because in the end, the kid they tried to silence was the only one listening.